Vielleicht ganz kurz mal einstellen, Sie haben ja noch einen legendären Ruf. Wie ist die Prognose heute, Herr Wilde?
Ja, wir hoffen alle das Beste. Ich meine, deswegen formieren wir uns ja hier heute auch wie jedes Mal und versuchen das Mögliche zu tun, was von uns ausgeht. Aber die Frage ist, wie ist der Heile drauf? Und die wird er nur selber beantworten können. Und in 2,5 Stunden wissen wir mehr.
Was für eine Zeit kommt raus?
Also, es träumen alle von der 2:03, aber müssen wir mal gucken.
Okay. Wird es unter 2,4?
Sehr schön.
I bet he felt like he was floating on air through the last few hundred meters because the world record was on. He could see the clock on the lead vehicle ahead of him. The Brandenburg Gate behind him at this stage. 200 meters to run. Haile Gebrselassie, some 30 seconds or so inside world record schedule for the last couple of kilometers, knew that it was within his grasp. The crowds too have the buzz. They knew the world record was on the way. The distance marker showing less than 200 meters to run. The clock showing he's got nearly a minute yet to go before Paul Tergat's mark comes up. And this is the figure of Haile Gebrselassie, majestic in motion, coming towards the line. These images will pour out around the world. It'll be the sporting news of the day, surely. Haile Gebrselassie taking the distance of marathon running, the time of the world record, into a new zone altogether. 2 hours, 4 minutes, 26 seconds. 29 seconds quicker than the 4-year-old world record of Paul Tergat in the Real Berlin Marathon. Mark Milder, their race director.
Berlin, wissen Sie, das ist diese flache Strecke. Die Zuschauer, die Stadt und die Leute, die kommen, um mir zuzuschauen. Die Atmosphäre ist fantastisch. Und nicht zu vergessen, Berlin ist eine historische Stadt.
Hello and welcome to coverage now for the next 2.5 hours of the 35th edition of the Berlin Marathon. Myself, Tim Hutchington, Stuart Story beside me. We'll be with you now for this glorious Sunday morning run around the city. It's a large clockwise loop around the German capital, now Germany's largest city, and of course in the footsteps of Haile Gebrselassie, who has won here for the last 2 years and set a historic world record 12 months ago. There will be some 40,000 runners around the streets of Berlin this morning. There are over 49,000 entries. The normal no-show will account for some 20 or 25% of that. But what a wonderful city they have to run through. It's a major cultural city, full of museums, galleries and concert halls, with iconic sites such as the Bahnhof Zoo, the Brandenburg Gate and the wonderful Tiergarten. It's one of Europe's greenest cities as well. There is the Brandenburg Gate that they will come through with about 200 meters to run at the finish. The race due underway at 9 o'clock local time. That's in 8 minutes from now. But of course the big question mark in the media over recent weeks has been whether or not Haile Gebrselassie, who didn't run the Olympic Games marathon a month or so back because he wanted to focus on this one, whether or not he can improve on his old world record from last year, and indeed whether Germany can have a winner in the women's race with Irina Mikitenko, the London champion from last April, who was second here 12 months ago, will be going for victory. Mikitenko now very much a different force to when she was 12 months ago, making her debut on the streets of Berlin. Stuart, a lovely morning. Conditions absolutely perfect for marathon running as they negotiate this route around the city.
Yes, it is. It's a very fast course, as the times have suggested. It's not just Haile Gebrselassie that's broken world records here. Of course, Paul Tergat did that on the 30th occasion of the run. And as it wends its way through the city here, as Tim was saying, the finish, the Brandenburg Gate, just beyond it, and cross the river there. It's a some long straight parts to this course, which means that it's going to be quick. It's not particularly warm this morning, but then one would expect that. But conditions are generally considered to be good. So if Tergat did it, Gebrselassie did it. But when you consider that he's asking himself to run just inside 2:57 per kilometre to achieve the world record for the marathon here, then, well, it is quite remarkable. There are 24 pacemakers who will help the athletes along their way here. And of course, it's not just for the elite who will have pacemakers. There are several club runners who have got their own pacemakers, and those just a little bit beyond the club runners who have also got theirs. And Mikitenko will have her pacemakers further back in the field. And one would suggest that there are one or two records that she could look forward to. Tim has already mentioned Mikitenko. She's on local territory, of course. And looking at the world record for sub, that's the age 35 plus, is 2:21.29, held by Petrova. And I just wonder whether Mikitenko will be able to challenge that on this occasion. It's going to be a tough ask because it's about 2.5 minutes faster than she's run before. But nevertheless, Tim, the athletes look as though they've gone through the warm-up, and as you said, there are 49,000 entries. It's never absolutely clear at this stage how many have turned up, but a vast number have turned up quite clearly from the site that we've got down the straight towards the Brandenburg Gate.
There is that wonderful aerial shot. They do start in waves in Berlin, by the way. About 7,000 at a time get underway, which is a good idea. It enables more people to get that feeling of being at the start rather than almost half a mile back from the start, which is the case in many of the world's biggest marathons, where there is just one gun, one big start. There are the essentials. Lines of Portaloos. My word, are they popular in the last half hour or so before the race. But there's an indication of the conditions. 10 degrees centigrade, a glorious sunny morning in Berlin. Wind, well, very small wind coming from the west. It will be negligible down on ground level, I'm sure. It looks ideal out on the streets there, as we see the Brandenburg Gate there. And the start on the Unter den Linden and Strasse of the 17th June, where that start line is positioned as always. There's a very small elite tent in the woods there. Well, the Gebrselassie and Mikitenkos will be going through their final checks, making their shoelaces done up properly. The stretching is done, the warm-up is done correctly. You don't need a great deal of warm-up for a marathon, by the way. You can ease into it. You're on your feet for well over 2 hours, let's forget.
I think, Tim, for all of the athletes, and I'm not talking about just the elite who will know their capabilities well, but certainly the advice to those new to the event is to start slowly and then slower than you thought you were going to start, because life can get difficult beyond halfway for those who are trained but not raced, and of course they will need to be wary of the way they feel, and if they feel good, not to let themselves go too early in the race. And when you talk about that, Gebrselassie has attempted the world record before, but has gone off far too quickly, and an athlete of his experience, so it's very easy for anyone to do that.
Yes, it is. In last January in Dubai, Haile Gebrselassie went out at what was regarded at the time as a suicidal pace, and it turned out to be too quick. He still ran the second fastest time in history, behind his own clocking of 2 hours, 4 minutes and 26 seconds from 12 months ago in Berlin. But in January he went out too fast, Still ran 2 hours 4 minutes 53, and he said after the race, I got it wrong, I made mistakes, I'm still making mistakes at my age. He's 35 years old now and still learning. But he says that what he wants to do today is to go out at the same pace as last year. He knows that last year he got it just about perfect, but he believes he can finish the second half at a quicker tempo. So that's where he feels he can make up time, where there is a little bit to be gained, so to speak, by running negative splits. And there is the great man. They call him the Emperor, Haile Gebrselassie. Delightful fellow, very, very relaxed, easy to talk to, obviously fluent in English, enormously charismatic man, and going for his third successive victory here today. That he would be the first man to have achieved that in Berlin if he manages it. He has a host of gold medals from the track, 4 times world champion at 10,000 metres, twice Olympic champion at 10,000 metres, but now that he's moved up to the roads, my word, is he beginning to do some damage at the distances, the most challenging distances as well. He calls this one, the marathon, the king of the distance races. It's the one that he wants so badly, but he felt that the pollution potential in Beijing was sufficient to stop him racing there over 26 miles. He has said, however, that he intends fully to participate in the London 2012 Olympic Games, and he has even said, why not 2016 as well, by when he will be 45 years old, by the way.
Please welcome Mr. Haile Gebrselassie.
And there is the great man being introduced to the crowd. Has had a slight niggle, we understand, a couple of weeks ago. Got some cramps in one of his legs, but he said it was nothing serious. It's fairly normal, he said, when you're putting in the extra mileage for marathon training. And he says, everything in my preparation has been just about perfect. And included in that preparation was a run in the Olympic Games, but over 10,000 metres, his old track distance. He was 6th in the Olympic Games, 10,000 metres. He's not quite got the speed these days to go with the Kenenisa Bekele, the man who did take gold. And there is Irina Mikitenko, the champion from London last April, 2nd in this race last year to get to Wami. And she ran a very, very smart race 12 months ago with a quick second half to move through from 4th to 2nd. Then she improved her time to a new German record on a legitimate course, that is, in London. And she's chasing that time today. And if she wins here today, she will lead the World Marathon Majors points table. The world's 5 of the world's top marathons, biggest marathons, have got together to form a sort of Grand Prix. I'll explain more to you about that scoring system later on, but if she wins here today, Mikitenko could be heading for $500,000 payday in about a month's time.
15 seconds.
So, about 10 seconds to go before the elite field get underway. Tense moments.
3, 2, 1, go.
Well, away they go. Haile Gebrselassie smiling as he gets underway. Quite remarkable. The attitude this man has. Loves his training. Says, why retire when you're enjoying it, when you're still good at your sport? Indeed, he's had a friendly swipe at Lance Armstrong in recent days, saying that Armstrong shouldn't have announced a retirement 3 years ago because it was clearly premature. The American 7 times Tour de France winner has come out in recent weeks and said he's making a comeback. Gebrselassie says, well, why bother doing that? It happens all too often. Don't announce a retirement. Don't give yourself a deadline and put pressure on yourself like that. Just enjoy your sport, and if you feel it gradually wilting over a period of time, then filter your way out of the sport, but don't actually put yourself under pressure.
Well, each one of these athletes will be starting their own stopwatches, their personal watches. They will be careful to note on the kilometre markers all the way around exactly what times they are doing. And incidentally, the pacemaker there is Wilson Keegan of Kenya, alongside Haile Gebrselassie. But just to go back to the masses as the elite get underway, these people are running for various challenges. A challenge to bring money for charities, a challenge against themselves and against the clock. Some will never have run a marathon before, and some will learn a great deal about running long distances here. Training is all very well, but once you get into a race and get people alongside you, well, who knows. A couple of pacemakers there. Number 96 is Jonathan Mayo, another Kenyan. There's a whole host of Kenyans there who will be establishing the pace. Gebrselassie right in the middle of that group. They'll set the pace for him. He's protected, and that's how it will develop as they go along. Now, we don't expect Gebrselassie to be close to many of these athletes, Tim, for very much longer, really, because of the paces. If he's going to break his world record, he's got to be looking at 2:57 for each kilometre, and of course we'll bring you up to date with those times. But look at this, wonderful scenes, isn't it? Look at this, the stopwatches all clicking. There is an official timing, of course. They'll all have the chips on and they'll all have an official time, but it's always nice to know where you are at a various point, whether you're going faster or slower than when you were in training. And sometimes it's difficult to get out of the way of people here. You're slowed down and you get worried and you think, oh well, let's just go with it and not worry about the pace. But they are spreading out, aren't they, already?
They are indeed, yes. That's the Sieger Saula, just a few hundred yards down the course on the 17th of June Strasse. They, as you can see, go both sides of it. These athletes, of course, now a long, long way behind Haile Gebrselassie and the leaders who have been running for 3 minutes, just over 3 minutes. That means they'll have gone ploughing through the half-mile point, through the first kilometre. And last year, Gebrselassie churned out kilometres of around 2:57, as Stuart said, as an average. But he did run his first half quite conservatively by his own standards. He went through halfway in 62 minutes 29 seconds, then accelerated through the second half. He will be very, very relaxed here, Haile Gebrselassie, quite comfortable, needs to remain that way. These pacemakers will, rather like a lunar rocket, gradually drop away in different stages until at around 30 kilometres he should be left on his own. That's what happened last year when the race unfolded 12 months ago, and it was absolutely perfect. He had two pacemakers, Wandimu of Ethiopia and Rogers Rop of Kenya, very high caliber pacemakers, with him until 30 kilometres, and then he actually accelerated through that final 12 kilometres when he was on his own, Stuart.
Yes, let's just mention one or two of the other athletes up the front. I noticed Charles Kamathi, the Kenyan, was there, and so was Toshinari Suwa of Japan. Those two up front. We expect Gopalis, who won the race in 2001, to be up there. He'll be wearing number 5, a red vest with black short. Adimasu of Ethiopia, he'll be there as well. James Kwambe also there. There's Nick Mikitenko, of course, surrounded by pacemakers at this early stage. And these mixed races, well, they're interesting in a way, and it gives the female athletes a chance to measure themselves against the males, and you can see that there's a complete array of male and female athletes all running together there. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are 24 pacemakers in these races. Now, some of those pacemakers will be surrounding Mikitenko here, and I was just looking at two of them. There'll be Jan Bielk of Poland and Michael Kazitit of Kenya. There are two designated pacemakers for Mikitenko here.
Yes, she looking very comfortable there, Mikitenko. Mother of two, 35 years old now, Mikitenko. Of course, the World Athletics Championships are in Berlin next year. She says she will run in the marathon there. Gebrselassie has made the same statement. They both intend to return to the city and race here in about 10 or 11 months' time for those World Championships, which would suggest, I suppose, they might not be back next year for this race, although stranger things have happened. It will be very unusual, that, actually, the thought of seeing a World Championship marathon race taking place in August, and then in late September the marathon race of the Berlin Marathon, the 36th edition as it will be. Here's that leading pack though, with Gebrselassie in that yellow vest, very easy to spot. Appropriately, I suppose you could call that vest of his a golden yellow. This man is looking here for his 26th world record or world best today, Haile Gebrselassie, and every opportunity, every chance of it happening, frankly, with conditions being so good. Kamathi there to the right. I think he's, if not a danger man, then certainly one of the favourites to finish close up in the wake of Gebrselassie. He was world champion in 2001, but he set his personal best for the marathon just last year, Kamathi. He is a man who is still very much at the height of his powers, relatively inexperienced at the marathon, winning Rotterdam last year in 2 hours 7 minutes and 33 seconds. That was about 16 months ago, but he's certainly served his apprenticeship as a 10,000 metre runner in the colours of Kenya. And of course, those are mostly Kenyans around Gebrselassie. The days of the considerable friction between Ethiopian and Kenyan athletes, the East African cousins almost as they are gone some way back into the past now, because you frequently get Kenyan athletes of real stature pacemaking for Ethiopians and vice versa.
About 2.5 kilometres gone, I would think. We'll soon get some statistics hopefully on the screen which will give you an idea of the sort of pace that they're running at. But you can see how protected Gebrselassie is in that yellow vest. Kamathi is there, and I was looking for the Japanese runner Suwa, but I think he's dropped off the back of that group. He tried to stay with the early pace, so Kamathi is the only one at the back. I'm just trying to identify who that is on the left. Just wondering if that's Kiprop. I'm not sure. Just behind, if you notice at the back, there are two athletes. Kamathi's in the centre, just behind Gebrselassie, as the picture shows you there. We'll just try and identify. I know who that is.
I think, Stuart.
I think it is Wambai, you're quite right. And James Wambai is an athlete, was 8th in the Boston Marathon in April, 2:15.52, so he's certainly fancying his chances here. It's a good deal quicker, but of course you can't judge from the time of marathons because the way in which they're run. This is very much for time. This is very much about challenging speed, and of course in Beijing, well, Wambai of course didn't do too badly, did he?
No, Wambai in Beijing, the Beijing Marathon. We don't mean the Olympic Games, by the way. We mean Beijing almost 2 years ago, the City Marathon. He won there in a 2:10, Wambai.
Yeah, he had some good runs in 2006. There are two races highlighted there, 2:10, and Miki Tenko just looking very comfortable. So she will at this early stage of the race, and there'll be one or two other female athletes there as well.
Yes, I think that looks like the Kenyan Helena Kiprop there to the left of pitch, just gone out of shot, is a couple of strides ahead of Miki Tenko. She's a very, very smart racer though. Miki Tenko ran a tough race to win in London last April against a very strong field. And certainly last year when she came into Berlin as a complete novice at this distance, she approached it exactly right. She ran a very conservative first half, and then gradually moved through. And she's
noch nicht, aber also morgen werde ich auf jeden Fall beim Marathon Tempo machen, 25 Kilometer lang, und hoffe, dass es klappt.
Für wen machen Sie Tempo morgen?
Na, für Irina Mikitenko.
And was ready for more, and that's really is exactly the way to run a marathon. Try and make your early experiences as a marathon runner positive. Come away from them feeling that there's more that can be done, and be relishing your next experience. If your first marathon race as an elite athlete is a negative experience, it can be take a long time to get over it.
Once you get into a race of this kind, you're deep in concentration, and you can see on the face of Haile Gebrselassie here, eyes down. He's concentrating, he's deep in concentration. 3:51, I'm not sure what that is. I think that is 10:38 is the overall time. 3:57 is into the second kilometre. I'm not sure why that time came up, Tim. I don't know whether you agree with that.
No, I couldn't agree more, Stuart. 10:52 they've been on the road now. They'll go through 5 kilometres, we suspect, in around 14:45, something like that. If anything, though, just my instincts tell me they're going a little bit too quick here, and it is absolutely critical these pacemakers get it right. They're paid well, these pacemakers, and the job they have to do is very, very important indeed. When you're trying to push the boundaries of human endeavour, they have to get it right. If they go out too quickly here, Gebrselassie will pay for it in the latter stages, so let's hope they get it right. It's critical that first 5 kilometres is no quicker, frankly, than around 14:40, 14:45. Last year, He went through 5k, 5 kilometers, that's just over 3 miles in 14 minutes 44 seconds. And he described, even now, he describes last year's whole experience as absolutely perfect. So he doesn't want to be very much quicker than that.
Abel Karui, the pacemaker on the right. And behind him, wearing the 96, is Jonathan Mayo. Give them a mention at this stage because the job they do is absolutely vital. And you can see that they're, look at the photographers out to get the picture of the great man. They really are. And
well, they just went through 4 kilometers, Stuart, in about 11:46. A little bit of quick calculating. Add 3 minutes to that, you've got your 14:46, and you need to be going a little bit quicker than 3 minutes. So pretty much spot on. I thought they looked like they were going too quick. There is that second group. Now they will almost inevitably, I believe, be going quicker than they want to be. Sewa there, looking around him, glancing behind him already, as if to look perhaps for a group that he can latch onto further back.
yeah, I think you're right, Tim, because he latched himself onto the leading group. He did, and all of a sudden there was that little look of apprehension, and he dropped right back early on, very, very early on, recognizing perhaps the fact that you've mentioned already that pace is very, very quick indeed, and he thinks to himself, well, hang on a minute, this is a time which I'm not able to match, and therefore it's better if I establish a regular pace early on, and as you say, pick up one of the pacemakers a little bit lower down. We'll have to wait and see what he does.
Well, 85 there to the left of picture, that's Wilson Keegan, 28-year-old Kenyan, who's there specifically as a pacemaker for Gebrselassie.
Looks about 150 meters the lead at the moment, but look how easy it is. But what physiology these guys must have to enable them to run this fast continuously. You see, if you're looking at 42 kilometers, which is the distance of a marathon, and you're looking at a world record that demands 2:57 per kilometer as an average, then that is quite an astonishing statistic, really.
Oh, it's frightening. It's frightening. You're operating down at around 4 minutes 40 per mile pace. It's 70 seconds per lap. You go down to your local athletics track and try and run a lap in 70 seconds. Then imagine doing that for over 2 hours. By the way, 14 minutes on the clock now. They should be about 30 or 40 seconds away from the 5 kilometer point, and that very, very important indeed. I can't emphasize enough to you how critical it is that they get this early tempo right if the world record is to be broken in Berlin, where conditions, as you can see from those trees, there's not a bit of movement. It's a lovely morning, a little bit cool, about 10 degrees we understand out on the streets. Last year it was 13 or 14 degrees at the start, but conditions absolutely perfect. And here is the 5 kilometer mat. Now that's interesting. That's Mark Milder there, passing Haile Gebrselassie, his drink spot. And Mark Milder's only the race director.
Well, 14:45. Well, they were certainly ahead of 14:45, which would give them 2:4:29, which is just unbelievable. At 14:40, they're 5 seconds inside. So it is very, very quick indeed. And that average of 2:57. Well, they're on that schedule at the moment, quite clearly. They're a little bit ahead of it, but that's not too significant at the moment. It's what happens a little bit later on, and once we get to halfway and see how the race is beginning to progress, and you know how in fact the pacemakers are able to sustain this sort of pace, because at some stage Gebrselassie is going to have to go it alone, because they're certainly not going to be able to manage. Kamathi's there, look, Wambai. We've mentioned them both before. And both of them are very, very good athletes indeed. James Wambai. I'm not sure whether he pronounced the K actually. It's Wambai. James Wambai. Personal best 2:10 in Brescia in 2006, just to tell you his time. So, you know, he's dropped behind here. Here we go, 14:35 then. Well, so that's even quicker. That's 10 seconds. That is very, very quick.
Yeah, it's actually heading for too fast. That's exactly what I feared. 14:35. It's 9 seconds quicker than last year. Now that number might sound very much 9 seconds, but if you extrapolate, project forwards that 8 times that up to 40k, they're 9 or 10 seconds too quick. It's about a minute and a third, a minute and a quarter too faster than last year. that would suggest he's heading for something like 2:03. So he's on almost exactly 2 hours, 3 minute tempo at the moment. 3 minutes dead, that is, which would be an improvement on his world record from 12 months ago of almost a minute and a half. They are going a little too quick through these first 3 or 4 miles.
Well, certainly they will have the clock on the lead car to make reference. And I mentioned this athlete on the screen at the moment. Let me just looking down the list. Ademasu of Ethiopia, he's there. And there's the 2001 winner, actually, Tim, Joseph Ngolepus.
There is the brand new station they've got in Berlin. That's the Hauptbahnhof, or Central Station. It's brand new. It's the biggest in Europe. Built specifically, we understand, to give the unified east and western halves of the city a symbolic heart. It's a massive structure, and certainly one that Berlin can be very, very proud of. It's a city, of course, that has iconic structures going back many years. The Reichstag, the Olympic Stadium, don't let's forget, built for those infamous 1936 games, the Jesse Owens games. We see Irina Nikitenko there, who missed out on the Olympic marathon 4 or 5 weeks back. She had injury problems that she says stopped her doing sufficient training for the Olympic Games to run in the marathon. But literally about a week later, in Germany, she ran 10 kilometers on the road and ran the fastest time in the world this year. Now, 1 or 2 people suggesting that actually she would have been in pretty good shape for an Olympic marathon, and that she was really perhaps just keeping her powder dry for this race today, and felt this was more important, perhaps a bigger payday potential than the Olympic marathon.
Just looking in the centre there in the red vest, Askale Tafa Margarsa of Ethiopia, certainly one who many would suggest might well challenge for this marathon race. He also deep in concentration there. Kiprop alongside her, just off her left shoulder, just now a little bit behind there. And the race for them beginning to Deriba is there as well. Actually, there's a very, very good spread of top-class African runners there for Mikitenko to contend with.
Exactly right. I think Mikitenko's going to have her hands full today. No Getawami, of course, the champion from last year, who went on just 5 weeks later to win in New York. But one of those Africans will cause a shock or a surprise, I'm sure. Here's that lead group. Look at the crowds out in the streets of Berlin. Huge crowds, less than 20 minutes on the clock. Gebrselassie with 6 men around him. 2 of them, in theory, racing against him, but the likelihood very much that he will be on his own come the latter stages of the event.
You mentioned earlier on, Tim, the prize money. It's 50,000 euros for a win here. But also there are sub-prizes as well, and I use the word sub deliberately because the first athlete sub 2:06 gets 30,000 euros, and if there are 2 athletes under 2:730, they get 15,000 euros. So there are all sorts of little incentives along the road. That's for the men, and the first woman under 2:21:30 gets 30,000. Now that's a tough ask. In fact, that's a pretty tough ask indeed. And whilst we look at just this array of Africa, there are 107 countries involved in this marathon this morning. So the world has come to Berlin, but at the moment, Africa holding the stage.
As ever, really, in the world of distance running nowadays, the Africans, the East Africans in particular, do dominate. They're another of those leading women. I think that's, we saw Chariot there. There's Kiprop as well. Francis Kiprop.
I think that's Helena Kiprop, actually.
Helena. I thought it was Frances, as in a female version of the name. What I'm fascinated as this tougher athlete to the left there. I've not seen her before, Stuart, but she's got a wonderful stride, very powerful, bouncing stride. It's not a fluent style of running, but it takes great strength to have a long, loping stride like she's got.
Yeah, we saw her in Osaka last year. She was 22nd in 2:38.01, so just to give you some idea. In April this year, she was 5th in the Boston Marathon at 2:29.48, just to give you a time on that. And she's been in the Berlin Marathon before. She was 3rd in 2005, incidentally, at 2:28.27. So she knows the course, she knows this area and the atmosphere of this marathon, but you can see how flat it is. It's a wonderfully flat course, and it's so well protected by those trees and by buildings as they wend their way around the outskirts of Berlin. She's run a lot of marathons, incidentally, over the years. The first major one she ran was in, 2005. So just to give you a little bit of background, because many were saying that Tafa Magarsa might well be the one to threaten. But this is the leading pack, and Gebrselassie remains in the centre, but I think the important thing, Tim, as you will no doubt support, is that we're looking to see what happens at 10k, because 5k was just a little bit quick. It was 10 seconds quicker than the world record pace, so we'll see. He looks very easy, but then of course things can change later on.
Yes, and I think if you go too fast through the first 5 kilometres, while it's not a good thing, you can at least adjust things in the second 5 kilometres up to 10k and sort of regather your resources. But if you compound the error by a second 5 kilometre segment that's too quick, that's over fast, then you really do start getting deeper and deeper into the mire, and it takes a lot to get yourself out of it. So let's hope that they have adjusted the pace here through this next 3 mile or 5 kilometre segment. Fabulous crowds here. I think the publicity that has been accrued over the years, let's forget that Ronaldo da Costa set the world record here back in 1999, the Brazilian, 2:6:05 he ran, and then Paul Tergat 5 years ago running 2:4:55, the first man to go under 2:05, and then last year Haile Gebrselassie, and that's just the men's world records. But the history behind this race, the recent history behind this race, is such that the locals cannot but support the race. Some cities, I have to say, the inhabitants can be a little bit guilty of almost regarding the local marathon as a bit of a nuisance. Paris, for example, in many respects doesn't have particularly good crowds. You won't see anything like these scenes in Paris, apart from 1 or 2 select points. But in Berlin, they come out in their hundreds of thousands and roar these athletes on.
Well, you know, James Kwambai is still up with that leading group, and you're talking about an athlete who has a best of 2 hours 10.2. So, you know, this is way, way beyond what he's achieved before. Charles Kamarthi is there as well. The pacemakers are obvious for you to see. Wearing the number 2 is Kamarthi. Number 10 is James Kwambai. So those are the 2 athletes who have dared to go with this leading pace group, and they're way, way, way faster than they've ever run before.
And interestingly, Stuart, one of the pacemakers there alongside Gebrselassie has on the back of his vest, on the bib on his back of his vest, says 62:30 pace. Well, they're going much quicker than that at the moment, much too quick. They're going at something like 61:30 pace, which is what Gebrselassie did in Dubai. It's making the same mistake. Let's hope they do make that adjustment. As we see Mikitenko now, part of a big group. Some of those male athletes will be gathered around her as official pacemakers, as others will just be latching on to the German, perhaps to get themselves on TV, but perhaps also because they know she'll be moving at around 2:24 pace. Now, interestingly, she is in the second group, the chasing group, in the women's race. These are the leaders.
Yes, indeed, they are. There's Rose Cherry up there, Asghali Tafa Magarsa is there, Helena Kiprop is there, and I was just wondering, I was going to ask the question, Tim, because Mikitenko must be about 40 or 50 metres behind this group. Tafa's with the red vest at right on the far side, to the left, second from the left on your picture. Chariot on the near side, but look how far Mikitenko is behind. I wish we could bring some times with respect to the women in this, but of course, being a mixed race, that is pretty difficult to do. So in terms of timing, when we're looking at what the records are and what records may be broken here, it's very difficult for us to tell. We can certainly do in absolute terms with the men, but you can see Mikitenko in the red vest in the back, that second group. That's deceptive. They're quite a long way back. She's surrounded by her 2 pacemakers plus others, but she's well down on the Africans, and I'm surprised by that, although of course the race is in early days.
Well, we know Mikitenko there in the red, the shortest figure in that group, is in wonderful shape after that quick 10 kilometres recently. The question is whether or not she is judging it right here today. She has a habit of coming through strongly with a a quick final quarter to the race. No doubt if some of those Africans out in front of her are going too quick, they will peel off and come back, and she will start passing them in the latter stages. But usually when you get a group going away at a very, very quick tempo, one of them will hang on and run the comprehensive race and stay out in front, so she can't let that gap get too big.
And also, Tim, she'll be relying on personal stopwatches here, because in a mixed race like this, the lead car will be way ahead with the men, and so there won't be the sort of advantage that these guys have got. Certainly, they're all taking a little. Look how deep in concentration it is. One often asked, what on earth do athletes think about? They get into a feeling of well-being. It's nice and rhythmic, and look at him. He's not even looking where he's going. He's just deep in concentration.
No, that's exactly right. I think the thing to do in any distance race through the early stages, or indeed up to halfway and perhaps slightly beyond, is just to switch off mentally. Don't feel too busy. You shouldn't have to do any real racing. If you're working hard in the first half, then you've overcooked it. You're going too quickly. So he should be feeling nice and relaxed now. Yes, he's working, but working at a nice, manageable rate. As we see number 10 there, that's James Kwambai, just beginning perhaps to struggle towards the back of the group. They're only, about a minute and a half or so away from the 10-kilometre point. That will be very telling, Stuart. Last year they went through 10 kilometres in 29:27. Now, if they maintain the tempo they've been going at so far through to 5k, they will go through in about 29:10, and that would be simply too quick.
Well, that would have doubled the advantage. It really would. I'm trying to work out what that figure is below the 9:47. I wonder if that is. I'm just trying to look at the women's. I don't think it's giving us any information at all. 9:51.52. The overall time 28:20 is the most significant one, and certainly the marks that we'll give you at 5, 10 and 15k. The point that Tim was making about that 10 kilometers at 29:30 would give you the world record thereabouts, 2:4.29, and if they're 20 seconds, that means they've made 10 seconds on the first 5k and 10 seconds on the second, if they've maintained that sort of pace, which means they're getting quicker. So it really is quite interesting, this. And you're right about our friend at the back, Mr. James Kwambai. I mentioned that his personal best is 2 hours 10. Well, he's on a pace for somewhere 6 or 7 minutes faster than that, and that may well prove difficult. He's really having to work hard to stay on the tail of that group, certainly.
Well, very difficult, of course. Here they come to 10 kilometres, by the way, and it is too quick. Look at that. They've gone through there unofficially in about 29:12. So Gebrselassie, something like 15 seconds, slightly more perhaps, quicker than he was last year at 10 kilometres. That's just over 6 miles they've run in just outside 29 minutes. And I think these pacemakers now need to be making some decisions and slowing it down and getting them back onto schedule, because Gebrselassie is totally dependent upon them. He doesn't really need to be worrying about the tempo. That's their job.
Yes, indeed. Ngusi there, number 17. Number 6 is Francis Kiprop. Mentioned him before. And this little group working together. But you're right about the pacemakers. They really do have to start thinking. And if those pictures show that they were chatting to each other. They were chatting right the way through that little phase that we saw, and I think that was the readjustment that may come.
There's a glorious shot of the city of Berlin on this autumnal Sunday morning, with history perhaps in the making. Yeah. Or is there a mistake being made here by Gebrselassie and his cohort?
Yeah, I think we've worked out what those figures were on there. It is actually the distance, it's not a time. So when we saw the 9:44, it was coming up to the 10k mark. So that'll give us a good clue in future. So that's quite interesting. We were thinking in terms of time, and it is in fact distance.
Well, Haile Gebrselassie, we were talking earlier, Stuart, about the physiology of some of these athletes. He is a typical East African in that, although it may sound rather cliched, he did as a youngster run 10 kilometres to school in the morning and 10 kilometres home. That's 6 miles. Now just imagine that in Western society, anywhere in Western Europe or even North America, and a youngster getting up in the morning at the age of 7 or 8 and running 6 miles to school, doing a day's work at school, and then running 6 miles home. No wonder by the age of 15, 16, 18, these lads come to the World Junior Championships and just blow away the rest of the world. The Caucasian athletes who perhaps started running at 12 or 14, whose lifestyles are so different. These men are almost running machines by the time they're 15, 20.
It's a very good point you make, actually. I was just looking at Gebrselassie. He first came to the attention of the world when he won that 5,000 and 10,000 double at the 1992 World Junior Championship. So that just supports the point you've been making. His first world record set in 1994 over 5,000 metres at 12:56.96. So as a junior he was absolutely immense, and of course he's continued to develop. Certainly over the 10,000 metres, we know that he won 4 successive world titles, 93, 95, 97, 99, and then the Olympic titles of 96 and 2000. So we know that, and then of course he's considered his future, and he says, okay, I may not have the speed anymore over 10,000 metres, and I want to concentrate on the marathon, and he is the fastest man in the world. He holds the world best, we'll call them, because the courses are so different, and the statisticians will always say, let's call it a world best rather than the world record. And of course this season he has the best 2 marathon times. Tim, you mentioned the Dubai record earlier on. Wow, look at this.
These are the leading women coming through 10 kilometres in 32:48 unofficially. 32:48 there, and we're just checking our charts to give you an indication of what that sort of schedule gives them.
2:18.
They are indeed on under 2:20 tempo. It's very quick indeed.
Yep.
This would be a course record indeed if they could run anything like 2:18 here, and it's Tafa who seems to be doing the leading there. That's Askale Tafa Magasa of Ethiopia. Well, it would make her the 3rd fastest woman in history, I think, behind Paula Radcliffe and Catherine Dereba. I wonder if they'll be able to hang on to that sort of tempo or not. It's very, very quick indeed, but it is a big help for those ladies when they have a number of male athletes around them, of course.
Well, that's a point I was just going to make, that it is a different endeavour rather than a female-only race, and that split would give them, you're right, under 2 hours 20. It would give them around about 2:19, perhaps inside 2:19, but whether they can maintain that sort of pace. But obviously, from what we've seen so far, conditions absolutely superb. They're the distance coming up on the screen below. 12 kilometres coming up, and this is quick, very, very quick indeed. But you know, it's deceptive, isn't it? It looks to be floating along, and I know that the pacemakers have had a little chat. They've had a little chat with each other to decide, because I noticed that earlier. I wonder if we are going too quick. They must have spoken to Gebrselassie about that, or would they, Tim?
Well, you'd hope so. I mean, you know, at this sort of tempo, it might not be a chit-chat conversational pace, but certainly they can talk to each other. They're not going flat out like in a middle distance race where you are almost gasping for air. So you would hope that they are paying attention to the schedule that is required. And indeed, there are people on the sidelines too, coaches and managers and other people with the knowledge to know whether or not they're going too quick. Mobile phones have changed the world, of course, and the pacemakers, you often see them getting advice from the sidelines. You see people screaming at them, telling them to make those adjustments. Here they go at the easternmost point of the course. This is Strausberger Platz, this roundabout. They take it round the outside there and then head due south away from the roundabout.
Yeah, they go down Lichtenberger Strasse to the 13th kilometre, just going through 12. They've just been through 12k and heading now towards 13, and then they'll take a right turn. But generally there's some long straight parts to this, so they don't have the rhythm disruption of sudden turns as you get in some marathon courses. But just over 12 kilometres gone then, 35:38 the time, so it is very, very quick.
Which means obviously almost exactly 30 kilometres to go. 42.2 kilometres will be the full distance, so 30 kilometres to go, that's around 17 miles. Gebrselassie has ahead of him at this tempo, or something close to it. The 15 kilometre marker is the next point where we'll get a really clear indication of the pace they're moving at. We know already that through 5 kilometres and 10 kilometres they're going much quicker than last year, and in effect that means for Gebrselassie wishes they're going too quick, because he said he wants to replicate the first half of last year when they went through halfway in 62 minutes 29 seconds. At the moment they're going at something like almost a minute quicker than that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at you mentioned the Dubai marathon earlier on, but I was just looking at the 10k split there, 28:39 for 10k in Dubai, so, and that would have given him 2 hours and 53 seconds overall. So and at halfway 1 hour 1.27, so they're astonishing times, they really were. And of course he did suffer a little bit towards the end, didn't he?
Well, do you know, it was a point of discussion for many years as to how to spread your energies through a marathon, but over this last decade or so, over the last 10 years, people are becoming more and more wizened to the facts, that you have to run negative splits in a marathon. You have to get to halfway in pretty good order, feeling strong, feeling you've got plenty in reserve. And I think Gebrselassie in Dubai last January didn't just overcook it, he really did throw caution to the wind and blast through the first 10k and then 20k and halfway, and it was too quick, and he must have known that at the time actually, but I suppose once he'd committed himself, Stuart, and reached sort of halfway, then there was no turning back. You can't regain that extra minute or so that you've spent.
Well, you know, just to think back to the London Marathon last April, Martin Lell, Samuel Wanjiru went through 30 kilometres in 1:28:29. That was 27 seconds faster than Gebrselassie's Berlin split from 2007. Now, if you take that into account, and Gebrselassie thinks, hang on a minute, London is nowhere near as good a course in terms of speed, then surely I can do that, and he wants to try and put it out of sight. And one would suspect that if Lell and Wanjiru were around here, then it would be a very different encounter of the first kind. One would suspect that, but that's an interesting comparison to make, you know, on the London course to be so quick. And they only fell outside of that record because it rained and the conditions deteriorated.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, what you do get in London, of course, with the amount of money that David Bedford, the race director, has got to spend, is fields of the very highest caliber with real strength in depth. So you get not just pacemakers and other athletes through to halfway and 25 kilometres and perhaps 30 kilometres, but you get a real race on your hands in the latter stages through 35 kilometres and 40 kilometres. How many times have you seen athletes racing against each other, ploughing along the embankment towards Big Ben and then turning right with about a mile and a half to go towards Buckingham Palace? And that makes the difference. Funnily enough though, Stuart, of course last year Gebrselassie accelerated when the pacemakers dropped out at 30 kilometres here in Berlin. His 35th kilometre last year was his fastest of the race. He went through his 35th kilometre with a 2-minute 50 split. Now that's almost track racing fast, it's ridiculously quick. And yet I think Gebrselassie was a real student of the sport. He knows his body well. He knows that the physiology changes too in the last 20 minutes of the race, that you can accelerate and start getting out of breath and getting that feeling as though you're in a middle distance race. When you know that the finish is only 5, 10, 15 minutes away, you can start really pressing hard, but you can't afford to be that extravagant when you're an hour away from the finish.
Coming up to 14 kilometres gone down the Moritzplatz and Heinrich Heine Strasse. That's the Strasse they're on. And just looking at that is Deriba, Shiru Deriba of Ethiopia. Not too much experience in marathons. This year was 8th in Rotterdam on the 13th of April, ran 2:37, just to give you a little statistic on Deriba. But certainly Tafa and Kiprot and Chariot are in that leading group. F4, that is Tafa, looking very, very comfortable indeed.
Hasn't she got a bizarre style, Stuart? Look at the flailing arms of Tafa there in the red nearest the camera. There's certainly no smoothness or fluency to the style, is there? She's quite knock-kneed too when you get a shot of her from behind. Long, slow, very purposeful stride she's got, which looks to me very uncomfortable. It's so untypical of what you see normally in world-class athletes. And yet she is the athlete pushing the pace. I just wonder whether or not her experience, or lack of experience perhaps, relatively speaking, is pushing her on to something too quick here today. It is interesting though that one athlete already peeling off the back of this group, Stuart, and I wonder whether or not it would be interesting to see now Mikitenko and how she's going, but if she will gradually start picking off these athletes that peel off this group that is moving frankly too quickly for the majority of these ladies. There's, what, 3 or 4 ladies in this group, and they're going much, much quicker than they've ever run before.
We talk about tougher. Real progress over the past 4 seasons. Times have progressed from 2:28 to 27, 2:27.57. That was from 2005 to 2006. Then 2:25.07 last year, and 2:23.23 this season. So, you know, as a confident young woman, slowly but surely developing in terms of time and in terms of position. She won the Milan Marathon back in 2006. She's always been there or thereabouts. She won the Paris Marathon last year, was 3rd in the Dubai Marathon this year. So I guess if you're looking at her credentials, well, who knows? This might be another development as we look at Gebrselassie's group now, moving on, and we're coming towards that next checkpoint of 15 kilometers now. We're looking at a time of 44:15 to give us just about the world record. Pace is only 3 seconds outside, and they were inside that. So, and you've got 14:65. So coming up to 15 kilometers, it really, they're maintaining this pace, Tim. It's absolutely superb pace.
It is, yes, very quick indeed. I'll tell you how you can, and clear indicator of how fast they're moving. Just pick a spot on the pavement that they're approaching and see how quickly they pour past it. They really are shifting. Well inside world record schedule, no doubt about that. Towards the back of that group, though, now interestingly, are Charles Kamathi wearing 2, and Kwambai. They are beginning to struggle, Stu.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Tim. Kwambai has been right on the back of that group. He's not quite on the tail end of it. All of a sudden, a little... Now, what do they ask? He says, "Can I have a drink, please?" Where's my drink? And they're all looking. I think Kwambai missed his drink there.
Well, what they are doing, the Berlin organisers, the race organisers, is what they've done in recent years. Each athlete has one assistant allocated specifically to them, and that assistant, in effect, cycles ahead on bicycles to the next drink station, and their special drink stations are every 5 kilometres. And gets the drink ready for the athlete. Now, to be look at the rules perfectly strictly, Stuart, that is illegal. The athletes are supposed to go and get their drinks from the side of the road. They've just gone through 15 kilometres in what, around 43:25, something like that, 43:25, give or take a couple of seconds. It's very, very quick indeed, but it is interesting, Stuart, that in Berlin, they do this, and they have done for a few years now. These elite athletes will be handed their personal drinks by people standing out in the middle of the road, and that contravenes IAAF rules.
Well, not only that, but I was noticing there that Kwambi missed his drink, looked across, and Charles Kamathi handed him his drink bottle. So there's a little bit of camaraderie there in the early stages of this marathon. But he could see the look of distress on James Kwambai's face as he couldn't find the bottle that should have been waiting for him. But Kamathi helped him out.
Well, if that clocking is right for 15 kilometres, 43:25, it's actually off my chart. It's a sub 2 hours 3 minute pace. It's something like 2 hours 2 minutes and 50-second pace. And again, I know I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again until they start getting it right. I think they're going too quickly.
Well, I checked once again with the Dubai 15K, 43:20. It's very similar to the times they were in Dubai. Now, you're quite right, Tim, because that predicts forward to 2 hours, 2 minutes and 54 seconds, which, and of course, towards the end, Gebrselassie found it difficult. He's been here before in terms of time, so we can't suggest that it's foolish, because this is a man who knows what he's doing. But 43:20 at 15K in Dubai this season, and that gave him the second fastest marathon run of all time, the second fastest time behind his own world record set here. Now, he knows that this is faster, so he knows that if he could perform the same sort of early pace here, then he's got a very good chance of going below 2:4. I mean, well,
the split's at 15 kilometres, 44:03, so take it back, we got that reading wrong. 44:03 does change things slightly, Stuart. 44:03, well,
it's about 2:04, isn't it? 2 hours 4 thereabouts. It's still inside world record pace.
I'm just looking at my chart here. 44:03 puts him on, almost exactly 2 hours 4 minutes dead.
Yeah.
which is again very, very quick indeed, as you pointed out, Stuart. Here is that lead group of the women, still with Tuffer, determined it seems to keep her nose in front. She's not using that pacemaker at all, that's for sure. She's running alongside him, if anything, slightly ahead of him. Right behind her there in the long white socks to ride a picture, that is Chariot. Rose Chariot, who is no slouch, a 2:25 athlete. Funnily enough, that personal best for her coming in Dubai last January, where she finished in 4th place.
Yep, she ran her first marathon in Germany, here in Germany, in Hamburg. In April 2006, she was second in 2 hours 27, and 6 months later, she won her only marathon in Amsterdam, 2:28.26. So, developing once again, and I think what we're seeing is a whole new batch of marathon runners developing here post-Olympic Games.
Well, this is a big group that has congregated around these leading women, probably 15 or 18 strong. There is Taffa, clearly very focused on running her own race here, not at all bothered by the other women around her, or I haven't seen a look over her shoulder just yet to see how much company she's got. There's that leading group of elite men who have goodness knows how many outriders and lead vehicles in front of them. But it is a well-coordinated affair, a well-coordinated operation they put on in Berlin. Lovely wide boulevards in a true Napoleonic style almost, that give plenty of room for the vehicles and the athletes themselves. Of course, in coming hour or so, they'll be pouring along this road behind these athletes, and they're tens of thousands.
The thing that surprises me is the fact that Kwambai and Kamarthi are content to run at this pace, which is equivalent to 6 minutes faster than they've ever run before. It really is.
There's Mikitenko with alongside her wearing F11.
That's Dariba. Sheru Dariba. They're way behind that leading group of women. As you say, things can change in a marathon, and we're not sure what Taffa can do, but I have to say that before the race, Taffa was projected as a possible winner, and you know, there is a very strong African presence as always, and it was suggested that she might find it difficult. And if you look ahead, well, it's very difficult to see the lead group now.
Yes, you saw a very good example there of Mikitenko being handed her drink by a man standing out in the street. That's her specific minder. The rest of the athletes, apart from a very, very select few elite, have to go and get their drink off the table or try and find it. There she's being passed a drink by another runner. And here are the masses, tens of thousands of them, pouring along the streets of Berlin. Wonderful atmosphere. Not too many fancy dress costumes in evidence, unlike the London Marathon over recent years, or indeed virtually since it started.
Well, certainly innovation in terms of various races going on here. There are skaters, there are wheelchairs, there are all sorts of mechanized vehicles being used as part of this racing scene here in Berlin 2008. It's a festival in many respects for all of those following. It certainly is, and very competitive whatever level you're at here.
Well, they call these the handy bikes. Coming in towards the latter stages of their race. They're approaching, I believe, these two, the Brandenburg Gate. We shall see shortly. Yes, indeed, whistling through it, and it looks like there's going to be a sprint start, a sprint finish in this one. Funnily enough, virtually no way of identifying the athletes, which is something that always puzzles me, whether it's wheelchair athletes in the Paralympics or indeed handy cyclists like this. I feel, Stuart, they don't work hard enough at giving you the ability to identify the athletes. Looks like a fabulously close race too. And look at the time they can move around the course in. A marathon race, 26 miles in an hour and a quarter. 1 hour 15:45, the unofficial winning time there. Our apologies for being unable to identify these athletes for you.
Yes, that is a pity. You're quite right, it's a great pity. Because all athletes deserve mention without any question.
Well, a first two.
Just another look at the first two coming through the finish.
An hour and a quarter. Dread to work out the speed they're moving at. It must be something like, well, it's about 22 miles an hour, isn't it? Something like that.
Yeah.
21 miles an hour. Gebrselassie here, well, moving at something like 13 miles an hour, because he will cover his 26 miles in just over 2 hours if he maintains anything like the schedule he's on at the moment. Haile there, gesturing to the men around him, smiling, obviously and clearly still very relaxed. They've been running for 51.5 minutes, just over 51.5 minutes. He needs to be feeling comfortable here because he's some way from halfway, still about 10 minutes from the halfway point. And as they say in a 10,000 metre race, which is 25 laps on the track, the real racing starts after 20 laps. Well, in a marathon you could argue that the real racing, the real effort should start being required in the final quarter.
Mikitenko, a relative novice, of course, in marathon running. With that, just to remind you now, her debut in Berlin last year, here in Berlin, she was second in 2:24.51. Third fastest German woman of all time on that, behind Ute Pippig and Katrin Dora, two well-known athletes we've seen and followed throughout the world of athletics over the years. This is the lead woman. And no change at all in those there. Kiprop is still there. It's just looking where Chariot had gone. She was just 2 or 3 meters behind. She may well still be in that group. But this is Askala Tafa Magarsa.
And to the left there, wearing 104, with the tall figure running alongside Tafa is Tola Debele Gudeta.
Can you see Chariot? Because I can't. Chariot was there right alongside and I can't see her. Let's just see if they follow through.
Oh, I can see Helena Kiprop, and you're right. Yeah. Chariot, well,
I said third at 15 kilometres. Now that's 49.47.
49.18 they were at
that's right.
15k there, Stu. So they're on now, still on 2:18.5 pace, about 2:18.40 pace. Well under 2:20, unless the wheels come off through the second half from Tafa and these other women. Well, Chariot, we could be seeing another 2:20 performance here.
Yeah, I wonder what happened to Chariot, because all of a sudden she's not there in that group, and I wonder whether we'll get a shot of her, whether she's stopped or whether she's just dropped back. But we were talking about Rose Chariot, weren't we? And
well, here's back to that leading group. 6 men gathered around Haile Gebrselassie like a royal guard almost. They call him the Emperor. That's his nickname, and how appropriate it is that he's surrounded by this sextet, surely none of whom will go with him through the final stages of this race towards what will inevitably be a very, very quick time, if not a world record, an improvement of his own world record. Kimathi is still at the back of the group there, second to right of the picture in that familiar black, green and red strip of the Kenyan athletes. Indeed, he is running in a Kenyan national vest.
Kwamba is there as well. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, they both latched on and they're running so much quicker than they've ever run before. I make that point again because when you talk about running quicker, you're talking about a minute or two, but these fellas are running 5, 6, 7 minutes faster than they've ever run before.
We know last year when Gebrselassie ran 2 hours 4 minutes 26 seconds for that world record, Albert Kirui was second in 2:06.51, but it was almost an afterthought, and Kipsang was third, 2:07.29, again almost forgotten in all the celebrations and excitement at the finish line as Gebrselassie crossed through the tape. And you do wonder whether that's going to be a similar result for Kimathi here.
Yeah, it would be rather good, wouldn't it? I mean, actually, Kwambai, who looked as though he was losing contact with that group, was just a little surge there to get back onto the tail of it. He was almost in no man's land at one stage, but his determined effort has seen him right on the back of that protected group with Haile Gebrselassie in that bright yellow vest in the centre of the group. The world hold of the world best time, attempting to achieve it. There's 19 kilometres just being passed for you, 55.50 50-ish for 19 kilometres.
Well, if we say 55.50 at 19 kilometres, Stuart, add 3 minutes, you get 58.50, take off 10 seconds, 58.40, and then you go to your charts for 20 kilometres. 58.40 is 2 hours, 3 minutes, 47 seconds. So he is operating at something like 40 to 45 seconds quicker now, and that is in terms of a steady schedule, than his race last year. But don't let's forget that last year he went out significantly slower than a steady tempo. He went out with a much slower first half than his second half. So Gebrselassie yet again here, and this will become evident, I suspect, in a couple of minutes' time when he goes through 20 kilometres, moving much quicker than 12 months ago, which is not what he wanted.
I just wonder what thoughts are going through his mind at this point. Concentration, yes. Feeling comfortable, yes. Looking very, very relaxed and easy, if it's possible to say that when you're running at around about 13 miles an hour. Which it really is an astonishing pace, this, to be running inside or there around 2 hours 4 minutes. His world record set here last year, just to remind you of that.
Well, he's got to keep telling himself to stay relaxed here, Haile. I think that's the critical thing. He'll be, I hope, not thinking at all about the cramps that he experienced in one of his calves just a couple of weeks ago. Now, F5 and dropping off the back here, that is Rose Chariot. You were asking Stuart where she'd got to. Well, now we have an indication that the Kenyan is, what, about 70 or 80 metres down on that lead group, I suppose, as we get this acceleration Tour de France style. And what a great shot it is from this bike camera as he comes through to the leading duo of women. That is Taffer, of course, and Kiprop, Helena Kiprop, leading now this women's field with about 10 or 12 men around them.
You know, looking at Kiprop, 2 consecutive second-place finishes in Amsterdam and Rotterdam in 2006 and 2007, so she's pretty experienced. Decided to compete in first World Marathon Major in Berlin last year, and really, when you think about that, she was 7th last year, 2:26.27, so she's determined to run a little bit quicker as we go back to the elite men, and the 2 athletes desperately trying to stay in contention. But 20 kilometres.
Yes, the 20-kilometre mark, then in 58.49 unofficially, and that compares with 58. Yeah, he's way inside there. In fact, I'm just checking, 58.11 I had for his time last year at 20 kilometres. That can't be right.
Well, in Dubai, 58.10. So once again, he's almost repeating what he did in Dubai earlier on this year. So it's very, very interesting, this. He will have learned a lot from how he felt at the end of that Dubai race, and I guess knowing the pace now, he will be preparing himself mentally and physically for what's to come in the latter part of this race when he has to go alone, because he will have to go alone. There's no question about that at all, because pacemakers are pacemakers, and they're not there to go all the way through. There you've got 58.50 as the pacemaker taking us through on there, so they're 10 seconds. So if you were projecting forward, it's 2:4.19 would be the projected time, which would be well inside the world record or world best performance for a marathon. But of course, as Tim was saying, the race is run in so many different ways, and of course we're judging it on the basis of even pace, and it doesn't work like that sometimes.
No, it doesn't. But the problem is, Stuart, that what he's doing at the moment, Haile Gebrselassie, is they approach halfway very shortly. They'll be going through halfway. What he's doing is he's going under the splits that we have for even tempo. Now, he wanted to be some way outside even tempo. It's not as if he's even hitting even tempo for world record pace. He's quite a lot quicker than that, and he should be quite a lot slower than it. So the margin of error might only look like 40 seconds or 50 seconds at the moment, but it actually is significantly more than that in what it actually means to the athlete. Physiologically, this is either going to be an astonishing improvement upon the world record, or it's going to be an error on the part of Haile Gebrselassie and those pacemakers who have to take much of the responsibility. That comes with the money they're being paid, and it's going to end in tears. I suspect, knowing Haile, that he is heading for his 26th world record, but if he is, then the way things stand at the moment, he's going to take an enormous chunk, around 45 seconds or more, off his own world mark.
Well, 21 kilometres or thereabouts is the halfway mark. 1:01:27 he ran in Dubai at the halfway stage, so you know, you're getting some idea now of how quick this is. And the point you make about whether or not this is a sensible pace, well, they've got that clock, you can see it on the lead car, and the pacemakers will see that, and so will Gebrselassie, and a little word here and there, not many, a little word here and there might well be passed between this leading group. And it's interesting to see this. They've totally surrounded him. He is totally protected on all sides.
Yes, they're doing a very good job indeed. Here they go through halfway, 62.03 at halfway. 62.03 at halfway. He was 62.29 last year, so he's some 26 seconds quicker than last year, just under half a minute quicker than 12 months ago. He has slowed a little bit, by the way. I had him at 10 kilometres in 29.12, although I haven't seen that figure officially, as one of the pacemakers there drops out. And then his second 10 kilometres after 29.12 was 29.38. So he has slowed quite significantly through that second 10 kilometre segment.
Yep, that's Jonathan Mayo, his job done as a pacemaker. He stopped and his part played. He's got cramp, I think.
Well, he's got 62.30 on his back, Stuart. They've just gone through in 62.03.
Yeah, well, that was his job then. He was due to pull out at this point, so he did a very good job, actually.
No, the point I was making was that they have gone through half a minute too fast. Astonishing, and when you think that Gebrselassie smashed Turgat's world record figures last year, he then went on in January to run 2 hours 4 minutes 53 seconds. If he's not careful, and if he does run down around 2:04 dead here today, he'll be almost a minute quicker than the next fastest person in history.
Yes, we're watching something special, and the weather actually has provided a perfect platform. We saw at the beginning, and he's warming up. There we go. Let's just break off and make that 1:02:04 for. So the point you're making is right. He's 25 seconds faster than he ran at the halfway stage last year. Despite the fact that they're so far ahead of the record schedule.
We mustn't forget amidst all this, Stuart, that 62 minutes and 4 seconds for a half marathon is a very much world-class time. There is currently no Briton that can approach that sort of time for the half marathon. I suspect Mo Farah, for example, could run that fast if he wanted to, and if you expand that thinking across Europe, there are very, very few Europeans who can run 62.04 or anything like 62 minutes for a half marathon at the moment, and significantly there isn't one in sight at the moment in this lead group. The East African dominance of the world distance running scene is pretty much complete now. It may well be we will never see a non-African win the Olympic 10,000 metre title, the Olympic marathon title, although having said that, of course, Stefano Baldini won in Athens 4 years ago.
It's interesting, you know, Tim, I was just reading a note on what happened in Dubai. He made a comment after that race. He said from the early splits being too fast, he said when he reached 10 kilometres, when I saw the time, I was discouraged. Now that's quite interesting, isn't it? When he saw the time, he was discouraged. So at that particular point, 1:01:27, which is a good deal quicker than they've run today, he became discouraged and knew it was too fast.
Yes, in my word, does he know a thing or two, Haile Gebrselassie. I think by most people's judgment, he is now regarded as the greatest distance runner in history, and that is including those great athletes of the early part of the last century, or the middle section of the last century. Paavo Nurmi, Kutz, of course, the Russian, all the big names who took European titles and world records and Olympic gold, and took running, frankly, from one era into the next, and did a similar sort of job, I suppose, within their environment or their context, as Gebrselassie is doing now. But their careers weren't as long as Gebrselassie. He's been around since, well, almost 20 years, I suppose, at the top of world-class distance running. He says Berlin is his lucky city. He ran here, first of all, in Ekiden as a junior in 1990. He's come back here again and again, and found it very lucky indeed.
You know, talking about statistics and records, it's quite interesting. The statisticians sit down and they work out all of these things, and another record that he's got on the books today, he runs faster than 2:06:40, then he becomes the finest ever combined total marathon runner for 1 year. In other words, the best of 4:11:34 when Khalid Kanuchi ran 2:05:38 in London and 2:05:56 in Chicago in 2002. So a combined 2 marathons in the same year, the fastest overall time, and that is, as I say, it's just got to run inside 2:06:40. So statisticians have been at it again.
Well, you can get totally enveloped in statistics. What a lot of people look at is the average of the top 3 times from any marathon runner, and Gebrselassie leads that grouping by a massive margin. His best 3 marathons prior to today average out at 2 hours 5 minutes and 5 seconds, and Paul Tergat next best 35 seconds slower, and Khalid Kanuchi next best after that a further 5 seconds back. So by Gebrselassie, by the standards that anybody else is able to maintain, Gebrselassie is way out in front. And when you think, Stuart, that he has world records at 5,000 metres and 10,000 metres and 2 miles, this is a man who has won the world indoor title at 1,500 metres, middle distance racing. He has an astonishing range. He has supposedly run 1 minute 46 seconds for 800 metres in training, although he's never done it in a race. And when you bring that strength and speed combination to the marathon, and you are able to put together several years of very hard training, and it is all about avoiding injuries, any distance runner will tell you that, then you can produce something special. And I do think we're seeing history unfolding once again here. Gebrselassie knows his body well. He knows the mistakes he made in Dubai in January, and I'd like to think he's not repeating it here.
You may have caught a glimpse of the Rathaus Schönenberg as they go down that straightway, the Martin Luther Strasse, between 23 and 24 kilometers, just to identify where they are on the course. And remember, newcomers to the marathon, 42 kilometers overall. And still the trailing two, James Carmarthy wearing the number 10 on his back. James Quambite wearing number 10 and Charles Carmarthy wearing number 2. They're the 2 tail runners on the left of your shot right now. They've been there or thereabouts. They're running incredibly well inside their personal bests and using this opportunity of having so many pacemakers there and helping each other along. Not a lot of chat going on. This is a personal duel with self and the clock, and of course the great Haile Gebrselassie.
Yes, Carmarthy there on the far side has looked very composed, to his credit, throughout the race. I'm just wondering whether or not some signs of strain beginning to show on the features of Carmarthy. Speaking of features, Haile Gebrselassie, as you will have noted, has a pretty wizened old face, does Haile. Indeed, talking to one or two of his agents, there's the leading women going through the halfway point, I think in 69.38 unofficially. That of course means they are on still on something like 2:19 tempo, 2 hours 19 minutes and 20 second tempo, there or thereabouts. As we see,
no change, tougher
no
it is.
No change. I was going to say tougher it is, still and pushing along, and she is determined to stay out in front, Stuart. She's not slipstreaming, she's not tucking in behind a pacemaker, and surely that is her own personal pacemaker alongside her there. I think it was a Gudeta.
Incidentally, Casa Tadesse wearing the 18 vest there of Great Britain, representing Great Britain these days. Just caught a glimpse of him. But this is Kiprop and Helena Kiprop. 2:26:27 her best. Now, from what we've said, she too is running well within her best time thus far. And unless the wheels fall off, there are going to be very, very quick times here today, which will, of course, be circulating around the world. She's a little word there, probably saying to a pacemaker, let's get up there and let's do some work. I don't know. There's a little word over her shoulder there. They are moving forward, look. She said, come forward. Let's push on a little bit. Let's see what we can do.
You mentioned Casa Tadesse there, Stuart, a fascinating athlete, a young man who came to Great Britain in 1994 for the World Cross Country Championships as a member of the Ethiopian junior team. He jumped ship, he claimed political asylum in the UK and has lived in the UK ever since. And I saw him last weekend actually at a half marathon in London, the Windsor Half Marathon. Now that's unusual. Most of these athletes, their preparation will have involved a half marathon 3 to 4 weeks ago. Should have had a half marathon about 3 to 4 weeks ago. A half marathon a week ago is too recent. And there is Tadesse wearing 18 on his vest towards the back of that group, just beginning to struggle. Why he would run a half marathon 1 week before a marathon totally eludes me.
Yes, indeed. I don't know whether you mentioned the fact that he was 14th in London in 2005, 2:15, but he was just looking at what he did this season. Actually, was 14th in 2005. I didn't run this year according to my list, so 2:15 is his best time. So you know he's around about the right pace, I would think, for that sort of time behind these lead women.
Yeah, he's been away from the sport for a couple of years as Casa. I was looking through my reference books last night for any results from him last year, and I couldn't find any at all. And there he is wearing 18 to right of picture, and just beginning to look like he's struggling to me. Bit of a forward lean to the torso, which inevitably means it's harder to bring the legs through. Simple biomechanics.
26 there is Herman Achmuller of Italy. Identifying some of the athletes. Also up there is Mika Takala, Ronnie Hogstadt, number 41 and 42 are there in that group with the women.
Well, they just went through 22 kilometers there on Grunewaldstrasse. Greenwaldstrasse, fittingly too, because Berlin is such a gloriously green city, full of parks and open spaces and surrounded by lakes and forests. It's a wonderful part of the world. The quality of life for Berliners generally very, very good indeed, and they also happen to have one of the world's very, very best marathons.
Certainly in that group, Hussein Awada, Omar Issa of Lebanon. There's some interesting characters here all around. I was looking at their personal times, and this group contains athletes who have bests of around about anything from 2:15 to 2:18, 2 hours 15 to 2 hours 18. So the pace which is being set is perfect. There's the second pacemaker gone. Well, 62:30 was one of the original pacemakers who stuck with it for a little bit longer.
Yes, dropping out, job done, an hour and a quarter on the clock. And what a good job he has done too. 85 there, just looking, that's Wilson Keegan, who has certainly contributed to the ease with which Haile Gebrselassie will have reached this point. Whether or not the great man is feeling very easy remains to be seen, but he's played his part very well indeed. If any finger can be pointed at the pacemakers in terms of fault, it would be that. And there in blue is the race director, Mark Milder, by the way, just gone through. If any finger could be pointed in terms of fault, it would be that they have gone a little bit too quick. But it may be, Stuart, that when Gebrselassie, when Haile woke up this morning, he took a look at the windless, perfect conditions, the blue sky, and decided that he would push the envelope a little bit further. He would try and break the world record, not just by 10 seconds or 15 seconds through a strong surge in the last quarter, but maybe he's decided that he would actually be a little bit quicker at halfway. So let's give the benefit of the doubt to these pacemakers and to Haile, who have been together here from the gun, and assume that it's unfolding the way that he would like it to.
Yeah, they're down to 2 pacemakers now, and incidentally they're between 25 kilometers and 26 kilometers at this particular point of the race. Rheinstrasse, they'll turn right onto Schmelienstrasse and then Wiesbadenstrasse as they approach 26 kilometers. with 2 pacemakers and 3 serious athletes in this group. And of course, just to mention James Mwambe again wearing the number 10 and Charles Kamathi wearing number 2, just behind Haile Gebrselassie. Way quicker than they've ever run before. It's worth mentioning that several times because this is really quite something. 1:13.40. They're just 5 seconds inside the schedule, the even pace schedule. So they're if you were to predict, it would be 2:04.25. So he would be 1 second inside the world record if they kept this pace going. So it's getting a little bit closer.
Yes, they have certainly slowed a little bit, haven't they, over the last 5 kilometres. That might not be a bad thing. Here is that leading group, which includes the leading group in the women's race. Just 2 athletes in there, and alongside Tafa is Elena Kiprop, who hasn't done any leading herself at the moment. Tafa hasn't glanced around at all that I've seen. I wonder whether she knows she's got athletes with her. She will be aware that she's moving at inside 2:20 tempo, no doubt about that.
Yeah, she's. I mean, just looking at her season last season, she was very competitive with a world best over 10k last season. 32:43. Gebrselassie just looks so comfortable, doesn't he?